The small-town diner had always been a sanctuary for Evelyn. Its bright red booths, the faint hum of an old jukebox in the corner, and the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee had a way of making her feel grounded. For years, she had made it her ritual to spend quiet mornings there, sipping her coffee and reading the newspaper while the world outside slowly woke up. At 62, Evelyn had built a life filled with simple routines. Since her husband passed 7 years ago, she found solace in the predictability of her days. But beneath her calm exterior was a heart that longed for something more, something she didn't dare admit even to herself. That Thursday morning was like any other. Or so she thought. The diner was unusually quiet, save for the soft clinking of dishes and the occasional murmur of conversation from the kitchen. Evelyn sat in her usual corner booth, her hands cradling a steaming cup of coffee as she flipped through the local newspaper. She was halfway through the crossword puzzle when the sound of the door opening drew her attention. She glanced up and froze. Standing at the entrance was a man she hadn't seen before, though there was something undeniably familiar about him. He was tall, his broad shoulders filling the doorway, with silver hair that glinted in the morning sunlight streaming through the windows. His face, lined with years of laughter and loss, carried a warmth that made her heart skip a beat. The man scanned the room, his eyes locking onto hers for a brief moment before he smiled, a soft, genuine smile that seemed to light up the room. Evelyn quickly averted her gaze, her cheeks flushing as she tried to focus on her crossword. But out of the corner of her eye, she saw him make his way to the counter and order a coffee. To her surprise, instead of taking a seat at one of the empty tables, he walked over to her booth. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice rich and warm. Evelyn looked up, her heart racing as she nodded. "Not at all," she replied, her voice steadier than she expected. He slid into the booth across from her, setting his coffee cup down with a careful precision. "I'm Jack," he said, extending a hand. "Evelyn," she replied, shaking his hand and feeling a jolt of warmth at the contact. For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, the faint hum of the diner filling the space between them. Then Jack spoke. "I just moved to town," he said. "Thought I'd check out the local spots. This place has character." Evelyn smiled, her nerves easing slightly. "It's been here forever," she said. "I've been coming here since I was a teenager." Jack nodded, his eyes studying her with a curiosity that made her feel both exposed and intrigued. "You seem like someone who appreciates the little things," he said, his tone thoughtful. Evelyn laughed softly, a sound that surprised even her. "I suppose I do," she said. "Life has a way of teaching you what really matters." Their conversation flowed effortlessly, moving from light-hearted anecdotes about the town to deeper reflections on life and loss. Jack spoke of his wife, who had passed 3 years ago, his voice tinged with sadness, but also gratitude for the years they had shared. Evelyn found herself opening up in ways she hadn't in years, sharing memories of her own marriage and the quiet loneliness that had settled in after her husband's death. There was an intimacy to their exchange that felt natural, as if they had known each other far longer than the hour they had spent together. As the morning wore on, the diner began to fill with its usual crowd, but Evelyn barely noticed. She was captivated by Jack's stories, his laughter, and the way his eyes seemed to light up when he spoke of things he was passionate about. She realized with a start that she hadn't felt this alive in years. When Jack finally glanced at his watch and sighed, Evelyn felt a pang of disappointment. "I hate to leave," he said, "but I promised my daughter I'd help her unpack some boxes." He hesitated, then added, "But I'd love to see you again. Maybe tomorrow morning, same time?" Evelyn's heart soared, but she kept her composure, nodding with a smile. "I'd like that," she said, The next morning, Evelyn arrived at the diner earlier than usual, her heart fluttering with anticipation. When Jack walked in, his smile was brighter than ever, and the sight of him filled her with a warmth she hadn't felt in years. Their morning ritual quickly became a routine, and over the weeks that followed, they spent hours in the corner booth, their connection growing stronger with each passing day. They talked about everything: books, music, their children, and the dreams they still hoped to fulfill. Jack's humor and warmth brought out a side of Evelyn she thought she had lost, and she found herself looking forward to their mornings with a giddiness she hadn't felt since she was a girl. One morning, after the diner had emptied and the waitress had stopped by their table for the third time to refill their coffee, Jack reached across the table and took Evelyn's hand. "Evelyn," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "these past few weeks have been unexpected. I didn't think I'd feel this way again, but you've made me realize that it's never too late to find happiness." Evelyn's breath caught, her eyes glistening as she squeezed his hand. "I feel the same way, Jack," she said, her voice trembling. "I never thought I'd meet someone who could make me feel this alive again." That afternoon, Jack invited Evelyn to his daughter's house for dinner. The evening was filled with laughter and warmth, and Evelyn felt a sense of belonging she hadn't known in years. As they sat together on the porch after the meal, the stars twinkling above them, Jack turned to her and said, "I want to build something with you, Evelyn. Something real and lasting." Evelyn's heart swelled with emotion, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to dream of a future filled with love and companionship.